I came back from the funeral with a secret that was going to change everything. My hand was shaking as I clutched the envelope in my breast pocket. Inside those folded papers was the deed to 3 massive farms and a beachfront property that my father had kept hidden for 80 years. I was ready to burst through the front door and tell my son and daughter-in-law that our struggles were over, that we were finally free. But as I reached for the handle, I heard laughter. Not just a chuckle, but loud, celebrating laughter coming from the kitchen. I froze. My father had been in the ground for less than 2 hours. I leaned in closer to the screen door, and what I heard next made my blood run cold in the 100-degree Texas heat. They were not mourning. They were celebrating my demise. Before I tell you what I did next, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share this story with more people who need to know the truth about family betrayal. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Harry, and I am 79 years old. I have spent my entire life building things with these 2 hands. I poured concrete for the highways you drive on, and I framed the houses you sleep in. I am a simple man. I drive a 1998 Ford pickup truck that rattles when it goes over 50. And I have lived in the same single-story ranch house just outside of Austin for 40 years. Most people look at me and see a tired old man with oil stains on his jeans and calluses on his fingers. They think I am slow. They think I am past my prime. But they are wrong. This morning was the hardest day of my life. I buried my father, Wallace. He was 104 years old. He was a tough old bird who lived through the Great Depression and never threw away a single scrap of metal or a spare nail. Everyone in town, including my own son Jason, thought Wallace died penniless. They thought he was just a crazy old hoarder living in a shack out in the country. Even I did not know the truth until the lawyer pulled me aside at the gravesite. I can still feel the heat radiating off the asphalt as I drove home from the cemetery. The air conditioning in my truck gave out 3 summers ago, and I never bothered to fix it, so I had the windows down, letting the hot Texas wind dry the sweat on my forehead. I should have been sad. I was sad. But beneath the grief, there was a bubbling excitement that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I kept patting my chest pocket just to make sure the papers were still there. 3 farms, 500 acres of land, and a house on the coast. The lawyer told me the land alone was worth millions because of the new highway development. Millions. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in years, I saw hope. I thought about Jason, my boy. He is 45 now, but he still looks like a kid who lost his way. He has had a run of bad luck lately, bad investments, get-rich-quick schemes that went bust. And then there is his wife, Monica. I try to love her because she is family, but she has always looked at me like I was something she stepped in on the sidewalk. She likes expensive things. She likes status. And lately, she has been looking at me with a hunger I did not understand. I pulled into the driveway of my house. The grass was dead and yellow from the drought. The paint was peeling on the siding. To anyone else, it looked like a teardown. But to me, it was the home where I raised my son and where I held my wife's hand as she took her last breath 10 years ago. I saw a black sedan speeding away from the curb as I pulled in. It had tinted windows and no license plate on the front. It looked out of place in our quiet neighborhood. A shiver of unease went down my spine, but I brushed it off. I was too focused on the news I had to share. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment in the silence. I rehearsed what I was going to say. I would walk in and tell them to pack their bags. I would tell Jason his debts were paid. I would tell Monica she could finally have that vacation she was always complaining she deserved. I wanted to see the relief on their faces. I wanted to be the hero, one last time. I got out of the truck, my boots crunching on the dry gravel. My back ached from standing at the graveside all morning, but I forced myself to stand tall. I walked up the concrete steps to the porch. The inner wooden door was open to let the breeze in, leaving only the mesh screen door between me and the hallway. I raised my hand to knock, but stopped when I heard the clinking of glasses. Champagne glasses. Finally, the old miser is gone. Monica's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. I thought he would live forever, just to spite us. I lowered my hand. My father. They were talking about my father. He left nothing. Monica. Jason's voice sounded slurpy, like he had already had a few drinks. Just a bunch of rusty tools and that falling down shack. I told you we shouldn't have paid for the funeral. It was a waste of money we don't have. Don't worry about the money, baby, Monica cooed. Her voice dropped an octave, smooth and dangerous. We are about to come into a windfall. I frowned. Did they know? Had the lawyer called them? I leaned closer, my ear almost touching the wire mesh. What do you mean? Jason asked. I am talking about this house, Monica said. And I am talking about Harry. My breath caught in my throat. He is losing it, Jason, Monica continued. Did you see him today? He forgot where he parked the truck. He is confused. He is old. He is a liability. I had not forgotten where I parked. The lot was full, and I had to park in the grass. But I stayed silent. So what? Jason asked. So we make the move, Monica said. I already spoke to Dr. Evans. He is willing to sign the papers. We can declare Harry mentally incompetent. We get power of attorney, Jason. We take control of his finances for his own safety, of course. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Power of attorney. Conservatorship. They wanted to take away my rights. They wanted to treat me like a child. But he will never agree to sell the house, Jason said weakly. Mom died here. He loves this place. He won't have a choice. Monica laughed, and it was a cold, ugly sound. Once we have the guardianship, we sell the house. The market is hot right now. We can get $400,000 for the lot alone. That clears your crypto debt and leaves us enough to put a down payment on that condo in the city. And Dad, Jason asked, what happens to him? There was a pause. I held my breath, praying my son would speak up, praying he would defend me. Shady Pines has a bed open, Monica said casually. It is affordable. They take Medicaid. He will be fine there. He can play bingo and stare at the wall. It is better than him wandering around here, acting like he owns the place. Shady Pines. I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the dying, a place that smelled of urine and bleach, where old people were drugged into silence and left to rot in soiled sheets. Monica, Jason said, and his voice trembled. Are you sure? He is my dad. He has worked hard his whole life. He is a burden, Jason. Monica snapped, her voice losing its sweetness. Do you want to lose your fingers to those loan sharks? Do you want us to be on the street? It is him or us. He has lived his life. Now it is our turn. There was a long silence, the loudest silence I have ever heard. I closed my eyes, begging whatever God was listening to give my son a backbone. "Okay, Jason," whispered. "Okay, do it. Make the appointment." The world tilted on its axis. My knees nearly buckled. The envelope in my pocket felt suddenly heavy, like a lead weight. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I had bailed out of trouble a dozen times. He had just sold me out for a condo and a clean slate. He was going to throw me into a hole to die so he could sell my home. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling not from age, but from a rage so hot it burned the tears right out of my eyes. I gripped the railing of the porch until my knuckles turned white. I could have kicked open that door. I could have thrown the deed to the 3 farms on the table and watched their faces crumble. I could have screamed at them that I was worth $32 million and they just lost every cent of it. But I didn't. My father Wallace always taught me never to play your cards until you know the whole game. If I walked in there now, they would know I had money. And if they knew I had money, they wouldn't just send me to Shady Pines. With Monica's greed and Jason's desperation, they would find a way to take it all. They would drug me. They would lie to the courts. They would bury me alive to get to those millions. No. They wanted to play dirty. I could play dirty. They thought I was a confused old man. Fine. I would be the most confused, helpless old man they ever saw. I would let them think they were winning. I would let them walk right into the trap they were digging for me. I slowly took a step back, then another. I moved as quietly as a ghost. I walked back down the concrete steps, careful not to let my boots scuff. I walked back to my truck and gently opened the door. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the house. My home. It looked different now. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a battlefield. I took the envelope out of my pocket. I smoothed out the wrinkles where I had crushed it. I looked at the legal seal on the documents. $32 million. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, loud and defiant. I saw the curtain in the living room twitch. Monica was looking out. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I wasn't going in there to drink their poison tea. I had work to do. If they wanted a war, I was going to give them one hell of a fight. I sat in the truck for another 5 minutes just breathing. I had to let the anger settle into something cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. If I went in there hot, I would blow it. I had to be the old man they thought I was. I had to be the confused, stumbling burden that they were so eager to discard. I looked at my hands one last time. They were stained with oil and age spots, but they were steady. I put the envelope with the deed inside my shirt, tucking it deep against my skin so I could feel the crinkle of the paper with every breath. It was my armor. I opened the truck door and stepped out into the heat. I made sure to hunch my shoulders a little more than usual. I dragged my feet slightly as I walked up the path. I reached for the door handle and took a breath that tasted like dust and betrayal. I pushed the door open. The laughter cut off instantly. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Harry Monica's voice rang out high and shrill. She was standing by the kitchen island, wiping her hands on a dish towel. The champagne glasses had vanished. The bottle was gone. In their place was a pitcher of lemonade and a plate of store-bought cookies. It was a scene straight out of a bad sitcom. "Oh, Dad, you are back," Jason said. He was sitting at the table, but he did not look up. He was staring intently at his phone, scrolling through something with his thumb. I noticed his leg was bouncing up and down under the table, a nervous tic he had since he was a teenager. He could never lie to me without twitching. I stood in the doorway and let the screen door slam shut behind me. I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years, I had seen them through the lens of a father who just wanted to help. I saw their struggles, and I made excuses. But now the lens was gone. I saw a middle-aged man who refused to grow up, and a woman whose ambition had rotted her soul. "I am back," I said. My voice sounded raspy. It wasn't an act. The grief for my father and the grief for the living were fighting for space in my throat. "Come, sit down." Monica rushed over. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, too tight. It felt like a claw. "You must be exhausted. It is so hot out there. I was just telling Jason that we should have driven you ourselves, but you know how busy the market is right now." She guided me to the chair opposite Jason. I sat down heavily, letting out a groan that was only half fake. My joints did ache, but not as much as my heart. Here, Monica poured a glass of lemonade. She slid it toward me. "Drink this. You look pale. Are you feeling okay? You know, at your age, heat stroke is a silent killer." I looked at the lemonade. I wondered if she had put anything in it. A sleeping pill, maybe. Or something to make me foggy. I pushed the glass away slightly. "I am fine," I said. "Just tired. It was a long service." "It was a beautiful service," Monica said. Her eyes were wide and sincere, but her mouth was tight. She did not give a damn about the service. She probably spent the whole time calculating how much the casket cost. Jason finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Maybe he had been crying, or maybe it was the stress of the debt I knew he was hiding. "Did the lawyer say anything?" he asked. His voice was casual, too casual. I paused. I let the silence stretch. I saw Monica stop breathing for a second. "He gave me some papers," I said slowly. "Old tax returns, some medical records. Dad didn't keep much organized." I saw the tension leave Monica's shoulders. She let out a breath she had been holding. "Well, that is to be expected," she said. "He was very old, Harry. We shouldn't expect much." I leaned back in the chair. I needed to test the waters. I needed to see just how deep the rot went. "You know," I said, looking around the kitchen, "I've been thinking. This house, it is getting to be too much for me. The roof needs fixing. The yard is a mess. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am too old for this." I saw a spark ignite in Monica's eyes. It was predatory. She exchanged a quick glance with Jason. "We were just talking about that, Dad," Jason said. He put his phone down. "We are worried about you. Really worried. You know, you left the stove on last week." I frowned. I had not left the stove on. I had been making soup, and I turned it off before I went to sit on the porch. Monica had been the one who came in later and claimed the gas was running. At the time, I thought I made a mistake. Now I realized it was the first brick in the wall they were building around me. "Did I?" I asked, playing the part. "I don't remember that." "See?" Monica said, soft and sad. "That is what scares us, Harry. Memory loss. It starts small, forgetting the stove, Forgetting keys. But then you wander off. It is dangerous. We just want you to be safe." She reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her hand was cold. "We did some research," Jason said. He sounded rehearsed, like he was reading from a script Monica had written. "There are places, communities, where you wouldn't have to worry about the roof or the yard." "Communities," I repeated. You mean a nursing home? No, no. Monica waved her hand dismissively. Not a nursing home. An assisted living luxury community. We found one that is perfect. It is called Shady Pines. It is right near the highway, so we can visit you all the time. They have activities. They have a garden. It is like a permanent vacation, Harry. You deserve a vacation. Shady Pines. I knew exactly where that was. It was a converted motel that the state had shut down twice for health code violations. It was where people went when they had no money and no family who cared. And the cost? I asked. My pension isn't much. Oh, don't worry about that, Monica said. Her smile was getting wider, showing too many teeth. If we sell this house, the equity will cover your care for years. We can handle all the paperwork. We can take that burden off your shoulders. We can manage the sale, manage the accounts, so you don't have to stress about math or banks. You can just relax. She made it sound so reasonable. Sell the house, give them the money, go to a place where I would die quickly and quietly. I looked at Jason, my son. The boy who used to sit on my lap while I drove the tractor. Is this what you want, Jason? I asked him directly. You want to sell your mother's house? Jason flinched. He looked down at the table. It is not about what I want, Dad, he mumbled. It is about what is best. You can't live here alone. It is irresponsible. Irresponsible. The word hung in the air. I felt a surge of nausea. It wasn't the heat. It was the proximity to this much greed. I needed to get away from them. I needed to be behind a locked door before I lost my temper and revealed my hand. I rubbed my temples. I have a headache, I said. All this talk. It is too fast. I need to lie down. Of course, Monica said, standing up immediately. You rest. We can talk about the details tomorrow. I will call the realtor just to get an appraisal. No harm in looking, right? She was already moving, already planning. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I walked out of the kitchen down the hallway that was lined with pictures of Jason growing up. Graduation photos, camping trips, memories that felt like they belonged to a different life. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I turned the lock. The click of the deadbolt was the most comforting sound I had heard all day. I leaned against the wood, breathing hard. I was in enemy territory. My own home was a trap. I pulled the envelope out of my shirt. The sweat had dampened the edges, but the ink was still black and sharp. $32 million. I couldn't leave this here. If Monica came in while I was sleeping, if she went through my pockets, she would find it. And if she found it, I would be dead before sunrise. I looked around the room. The dresser was too obvious. Under the mattress was the first place thieves looked. My eyes landed on the closet. On the floor in the back corner was my old red metal toolbox. I had carried that box for 40 years. It was heavy, dented, and covered in scratches. Monica hated it. She had asked me to throw it out a dozen times, calling it junk. She never touched it because it was dirty and greasy. I knelt down and dragged the box out. I popped the latches. The smell of oil and steel filled my nose. It smelled like honest work. It smelled like truth. I lifted the tray of wrenches. Underneath, in the bottom compartment, lay my hammer, my tape measure, and a box of old nails. I folded the deed carefully. I wrapped it in an old shop rag that was stained with grease. I placed it at the very bottom of the box and piled the heavy tools on top of it. I closed the lid and snapped the latches shut. Let them look for money in the bank accounts. Let them look for jewelry in the drawers. They would never look in a dirty old toolbox. I pushed the box back into the dark corner of the closet and piled some old work boots in front of it. I sat on the edge of my bed. I could hear them talking in the kitchen. Their voices were muffled, but excitement vibrated through the walls. They were already spending the money they thought they were going to get from selling my house. They didn't know that the house was just a beginning. And they didn't know that the old man in the bedroom wasn't sleeping. I was planning. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who knew the law and who knew how to fight sharks. I needed Ben Roth. But first, I had to survive the night. I laid back on the pillow, keeping my boots on. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait. And while I waited, I listened to the sound of my son selling his soul for a condo in the city. The smell of burnt roast beef hung heavy in the dining room that evening. It matched the mood perfectly. I sat at the head of the table, staring down at a bowl of lukewarm vegetable soup. Monica had set the table with the good china, probably trying to butter me up before they went in for the kill about selling the house. I could feel their eyes on me, like vultures waiting for a wounded animal to finally stop kicking. I took a slow sip of the soup. It was bland, just like the love in this house. I cleared my throat and put my spoon down. The metal clinking against the porcelain sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I need to tell you both something," I said, keeping my voice low and shaky. "I did some checking today. Went through some of Dad's old boxes I had in the garage." Jason looked up from his plate, his eyes wide with anticipation. He was practically drooling at the thought of a hidden fortune. Monica leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light, and Monica prompted, "What did you find, Harry?" I let out a long, ragged sigh. I rubbed my face with my hands, making sure to look as defeated as possible. "Nothing," I whispered. "Absolutely nothing. Dad died with empty pockets. The farm he talked about, it was sold years ago to pay for his medical bills. There is no inheritance." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, 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 counting down the seconds until the explosion. "But that is not all," I continued, not letting them interrupt. "I have been keeping something from you. This house, my house." "What about the house?" Monica's voice was sharp like broken glass. I looked her in the eye and lied through my teeth. "I mortgaged it," I said. 10 years ago, when your mother got sick, the treatments were so expensive. I took out a reverse mortgage. The bank owns it all. In fact, I am behind on payments. If I die, the bank takes everything. There is no equity. There is no money. We are underwater." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Jason stood up so fast his chair flew backward and crashed onto the floor. "You have got to be kidding me," he screamed. His face turned a blotchy red. "You are telling me there is nothing? No money? No land? Just debt?" "I am sorry, son," I said, bowing my head. "I tried to make it work." "Sorry doesn't pay my bills, Dad," Jason yelled. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the silverware jump. "Do you know how much I owe? Do you know what they are going to do to me? I was counting on this. I was counting on you not being a total failure." "Harry," Monica stood up slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a cold fury. She walked around the table until she was standing right next to me. "You are telling us," she hissed, "that you are essentially a parasite? You have nothing to contribute. You are just a mouth to feed and a medical bill waiting to happen." "Monica, please," I said, looking up at her. "I am your family. Family, she laughed, and it was a sound devoid of any humanity. Family pulls their weight, Harry. Family provides. You are just a leech. I have spent years tolerating your stories, pretending to care about your pathetic little life, because I thought, at the very least, you would leave us something. I thought you had some dignity. I felt a sting of tears, but they were not from sadness. They were from the sheer shock of hearing the truth spoken so plainly. So all this time, I asked, my voice steadying slightly, you only cared about the money? Of course it was about the money, Jason shouted. He was pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair. What else would it be about? Your sparkling personality? You are a boring old man, Dad. You smell like Old Spice and sawdust. You are a burden. We put up with you because we thought there was a payoff at the end. Monica crossed her arms. Her face was twisted in disgust. I should have kicked you out last year, she spat, when you got that flu. I told Jason we should just leave you in the hospital. Let the state deal with you. But no, he said, wait. He said, Dad has assets. Assets. What a joke. She leaned down close to my face. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath. You are worthless, Harry. Do you hear me? Worthless. I picked up my spoon again. My hand was steady now. I dipped it into the soup and took a sip. It still tasted bland, but now it tasted like victory. I had my answer. There was no gray area left, no doubt. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. I was just an investment that had gone bad. I am still your father, I said quietly. Does that mean nothing? It means you owe us, Jason snapped. He grabbed his bowl of soup and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, splashing orange liquid all over the floral wallpaper Monica loved so much. You figure this out, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You find money. I don't care if you have to sell a kidney. I don't care if you have to beg on the street corner. You find a way to pay your keep. Or so help me God, I will drop you off at a homeless shelter myself. Jason Monica warned, but she didn't look like she disagreed. She looked at the mess on the wall and then back at me. Clean that up, she said coldly, and then go to your room. I can't stand looking at you right now. You make me sick. She turned on her heel and marched out of the room. Jason glared at me for one last second, his chest heaving, his eyes full of hate. You ruined everything, he muttered, just like you always do. He followed his wife, leaving me alone in the dining room. I sat there for a long time. I looked at the broken bowl on the floor. I looked at the soup dripping down the wall like tears. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clarity that was sharp and cold like ice. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was helpless. They didn't know that the deed to $32 million was sitting in a toolbox just 20 feet away. I stood up. I walked over to the corner where the broom was kept. I started to sweep up the broken porcelain. I wasn't cleaning up for them. I was cleaning up my life. Every shard I swept into the dustpan was a piece of my attachment to them. The guilt, the obligation, the hope that they would change. I swept it all away. I dumped the shards into the trash can. I am not the one who is ruined, son, I whispered to the empty room. I washed my hands in the kitchen sink, scrubbing them until they were red. Then I walked back to my room. I didn't lock the door this time. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who they were now, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Tomorrow night, I would leave. But first, I had one more stop to make, one more secret to uncover. Because if the farmland was worth millions, I needed to know why Monica was so desperate for cash that she would threaten to throw her own father-in-law onto the street. I laid down on my bed, fully dressed. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the murmurs of their argument from the master bedroom. They were panic planning. They were desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the funeral, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who held all the aces and was just waiting for the right moment to lay them on the table. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath, not the silence of peace. I waited until I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring coming from the master bedroom down the hall before I moved. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. 1 a.m, the witching hour. I threw off the covers and swung my legs out of bed. My knees popped loud enough to make me wince, but I didn't stop. I wasn't going to use the front door or the back door. Monica had installed those smart alarms last month, claiming it was to keep burglars out, but now I knew it was to keep me in. If I opened a door, her phone would ping and the game would be over. But she forgot one thing. I built this house. I framed every window and hung every door with my own 2 hands back in 1982. I knew its bones better than she knew her own reflection. I moved to the window overlooking the side yard. It was a double-hung sash window. I carefully slid a thin putty knife I had grabbed from my toolbox between the sash and the frame to disengage the paint lock. It slid up without a sound. I popped the screen out, pushing it gently onto the overgrown azalea bushes outside. I might be 79, but I spent 40 years climbing scaffolding and walking steel beams. Muscle memory is a funny thing. It doesn't forget even when the body gets stiff. I swung one leg over the sill, then the other, lowering myself until my boots touched the soft earth. I replaced the screen from the outside, leaving it just loose enough to get back in. The night air was thick and humid, sticky with the heat that refuses to leave Texas even after the sun goes down. The crickets were screaming in the tall grass. I crept around the side of the house, keeping to the shadows. My truck was parked on the street because Jason's precious BMW took up the garage. I didn't start the engine. Not yet. I opened the door and put it in neutral. I leaned my shoulder against the door frame and pushed. The driveway had a slight slope and gravity did the rest. The old Ford rolled silently down the street, away from the house, away from the son who wanted to sell me out. I waited until I was 3 blocks away before I hopped in and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a familiar growl that felt like freedom. I put it in gear and headed for the highway. I was driving toward the coordinates on the deed, my father's land. In my head, I pictured dry scrubland, maybe a few dying pecan trees and a lot of dust. That was all that was out there in Travis County when I was a kid. Worthless dirt where you couldn't even grow hay. "Why did you keep it, Dad?" I whispered to the empty cab. "Why did you pay property taxes on dirt for 80 years? The drive took 45 minutes. As I got closer to the location, I noticed something strange. The road. It wasn't the potholed gravel track I remembered. It was brand new asphalt, smooth and black, with fresh yellow lines painted on it. I rounded a bend and hit the brakes hard. I wasn't looking at a wasteland. I was looking at the future. About half a mile ahead, the sky was glowing with floodlights. massive industrial lights that turned the night into day. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder and killed the lights. I got out and walked toward the property line. A chain-link fence 8 feet high stretched as far as I could see. And every 50 feet there was a sign. A big white sign with bold blue letters. Future home of Horizon Data Systems. Strictly no trespassing. I stood there, my mouth hanging open. Data systems. A server farm. I read the paper sometimes. I knew Austin was becoming the new Silicon Valley. I knew tech companies were buying up land for billions to build their clouds. But I never thought the cloud would land on my father's dirt. "Hey!" someone shouted from the darkness. I spun around, my hand instinctively going to the wrench I had tucked in my belt. A flashlight beam hit me in the face, blinding me. "You can't read, old-timer?" The voice was rough, gravelly. "Private property." I squinted, shielding my eyes. "Pete?" I asked. "Pete Miller." The light wavered. It lowered, pointing at my boots. "Harry?" the voice asked. "Harry Caldwell. Is that you?" A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Pete, the man who had managed the hunting leases on this land for my dad for 30 years. He looked older now, his skin like leather jerky, but he was still holding a shotgun like he knew how to use it. "I will be damned." Pete spat on the ground and walked over. "I thought you would be at the wake. I didn't think I would see you out here in the middle of the night." "I had to see it, Pete," I said, pointing at the fence. "What is this? Since when is Dad's land a construction site?" "Since about 6 months ago," Pete said, leaning his shotgun against the fence. "The state put in the new highway access road. Suddenly, this dust bowl became the most strategic point between the power grid and the city." I looked at the massive cranes standing silent in the distance on the adjacent lot. "So it is worth something?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Pete laughed, a dry, cackling sound. "Worth something? Harry, your dad was the stubbornest mule I ever met." These corporate suits, they came at him with briefcases full of cash. They wanted to buy him out 2 years ago. He told him to get off his porch. He said he was saving it for his boy. "For me," I whispered. "He knew what was coming," Pete said. "He knew the value was going to spike once the zoning changed. He held out until the very end." I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "Give it to me straight, Pete. What are we talking about here?" "Monica thinks we can sell the house for 400 grand. Is this worth more than that?" Pete looked at me like I was crazy. He took off his hat and wiped his forehead. "Harry, the lot next door just sold to Amazon for $12 million. And that is half the size of what you got here. You have 3 parcels contiguous. You have the water rights, and you have the access road frontage." He paused, letting the words hang in the hot night air. "The last offer they sent to your dad's lawyer before he passed was $32 million. And honestly, in this market, you could probably get 40 if you let them bid against each other." 32 million. The number echoed in my head louder than the crickets, louder than the highway noise. $32 million. I had to grab the chain-link fence to keep from falling over. I was a man who clipped coupons to save 50 cents on coffee. I was a man who was being threatened with a state-run nursing home because I couldn't pay my bills. And I was standing on an empire. "They don't know, do they?" Pete asked, watching me closely. "That son of yours, and that wife of his." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "They think I am broke. They think I am a burden." Pete shook his head. "Keep it that way, Harry. You know what money does to people. Especially that kind of money. It turns family into sharks. If they find out you are sitting on this ticket, they won't just try to put you in a home." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I knew exactly what he meant. If Monica knew I was worth $32 million, she wouldn't wait for a court order. She would find a way to make sure I had an accident. A fall down the stairs. The wrong pill in my drink. I looked at the glowing lights of the construction site. This wasn't just money. This was power. For the first time in years, I wasn't the helpless old man in the corner. I was the king of the castle. But kings get assassinated. "I need a favor, Pete," I said, gripping the fence. "Name it, Harry. For your dad, I will do anything. If anyone comes asking, anyone at all, you tell them this land is tied up in probate. You tell them it is worthless swampland full of chemical waste. You tell them the EPA has it locked down." Pete grinned, his teeth flashing white in the dark. "I can lie better than a politician, Harry. You don't worry about me." I reached out and shook his hand. His grip was strong and calloused, just like mine. I walked back to my truck. My legs felt different now. Solid. I wasn't just walking on dirt. I was walking on my legacy. I drove back to the house in a daze. 32 million. When I pulled up down the street and cut the engine, the house was still dark. I rolled the truck back into place. I crept to the window and shimmied back inside. I locked the window. I put the screen back. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the silence. It was terrifying. I had the weapon I needed to destroy them, but I couldn't use it yet. I had to wait for them to show their true colors to the world. I had to let them sign their own death warrants. I lay back down and pulled the covers up to my chin. My hand went to my chest, feeling the beat of my heart. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my life. Because now I knew exactly how much my life was worth. And tomorrow, the war would really begin. The sun came up like a bruised peach over the horizon, but I was already awake. I had not slept a wink after returning from the secret trip to the airfield. My boots were hidden back in the closet, and the red toolbox was buried under a pile of old blankets. But my heart was still racing at 100 miles an hour. I lay in bed, listening to the house wake up. I heard the coffee grinder screaming in the kitchen, followed by the heavy thud of Jason's footsteps and the sharp clicking of Monica's heels. They sounded purposeful today, like generals preparing for a final assault. I made myself wait until 8 o'clock before I shuffled out to the kitchen. I needed to look tired. I needed to look defeated. When I walked in, Monica was standing by the window, talking on her phone in a hushed voice. She hung up the second she saw me and plastered that plastic smile onto her face. It was the kind of smile a shark gives you right before it drags you under. "Good morning, Harry," she chirped, too loud and too bright. "You look rested. I have a little surprise for you." Since you mentioned being so confused about the finances yesterday, Jason and I thought it would be best to have a doctor come by, just for a routine wellness check. I did not have time to object. The doorbell rang at that exact second. It was choreographed. They had planned this down to the minute. Jason opened the door, and in walked Dr. Evans. I knew the type immediately. He was not a family doctor who carried lollipops in his pocket. He was a hired gun in a 3-piece suit. He smelled of expensive cologne and antiseptic. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my truck. He did not offer to shake my hand. He just looked at me over the top of his rimless glasses like I was a specimen in a jar that had gone bad. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his voice smooth and oily. "I am Dr. Evans. Your family is very concerned about your cognitive health. Why don't we sit in the living room and have a little chat?" It was not a request. Monica guided me to the armchair. The the one where the springs were broken. So I sank down low, making me look smaller and weaker than I was. Dr. Evans sat opposite me on the sofa, his back straight, his pen poised over a fresh legal pad. Monica stood behind him, her arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. Jason hovered in the doorway, chewing on his fingernails. I knew exactly what this was. In Texas, they call it a capacity evaluation. If this man checked the wrong box on that form, I would lose the right to sign checks, the right to hire a lawyer, and the right to refuse medical treatment. I would become a piece of property owned by my son and his wife. And once they owned me, they owned the $32 million they didn't even know existed yet. Dr. Evans clicked his pen. Let us start with some simple questions, Mr. Caldwell. Can you tell me what year it is? I looked at him. I wanted to tell him it was the year my family decided to betray me. Instead, I cleared my throat. It is 2024, I said. Dr. Evans didn't look up. He scribbled something. I leaned forward slightly and saw he had written a question mark next to my answer. He was already building the narrative. Very good, he said, without emotion. And who is the current president of the United States? I answered him correctly again. He made another note. He looked bored. He wasn't interested in the truth. He was interested in the result he had been paid to produce. Let us try something a little harder, he said. I am going to say 3 words. Apple, table, penny. I want you to remember them. I will ask you to repeat them later. I nodded. Apple, table, penny. It was a standard test. Now, Mr. Caldwell, your daughter-in-law tells me you have been having episodes of paranoia. You believe you have lost all your money. You believe the bank owns your home. Can you explain that to me? This was the trap. If I admitted I lied about the mortgage to test their loyalty, I would look manipulative and unstable. But if I stuck to the lie, I would look like I was suffering from delusions of poverty, which is a common symptom of dementia. I gripped the armrests of the chair. I had to play the part. I had to be the confused old man, but not so confused that they locked me up today. I needed a few more days to spring my own trap. I don't know, I stammered, rubbing my forehead. The numbers, they get jumbled in my head. I used to be good with figures, you know. I built half this town. But lately, looking at the bank statements, it just looks like fog. I think I owe money. I am scared, Doctor. Monica let out a loud theatrical sigh behind him. See, Doctor, she said, he has plenty of money. The house is paid off, but he insists he is destitute. He hides food. He wanders around at night checking the locks 10 times. He is living in a reality that doesn't exist. Doctor. Evans nodded sympathetically at her. He wrote rapidly on his pad. I caught a glimpse of the words. Financial incapacity. Delusional thought patterns. He turned back to me. Mr. Caldwell, can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I paused. I was good at math. You have to be to frame a roof. 93, 86, 79. But I hesitated intentionally. I scrunched up my face. 100, I said slowly. 92. 85. I saw a small smirk touch the corner of Evans's mouth. He stopped writing. He had enough. He didn't need me to finish. And those 3 words I asked you to remember? He asked, closing the folder. I looked at him blankly. I knew the words. Apple, table, penny. They were screaming in my brain. But I looked at Monica. I saw the greed in her eyes. I saw the way she was practically vibrating with anticipation. If I passed this test, she would just find another doctor. She would keep coming until she won. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to lower their guard so I could get Ben Roth and the police involved on my terms. Words I asked. I am sorry. Did you ask me to remember words? Dr. Evans stood up. He capped his pen with a decisive click. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. That will be all. He turned to Monica. She ushered him toward the front door, leaving me sinking in the broken armchair. Jason looked at me with a mix of pity and relief. He thought the problem was solved. He thought Daddy was officially broken. I waited. I strained my ears. They were standing on the porch just outside the screen door. It is classic advanced dementia, Dr. Evans said, his voice low but carrying in the stillness. The memory gaps, the financial confusion, the disorientation. He is not safe to be left alone, Mrs. Caldwell. So we can get the guardianship? Monica asked, breathless. I will have the report typed up by this afternoon, Evans said. I will send it over to Judge Hatcher. We play golf on Sundays. I can expedite this. You should have the emergency court order by next Tuesday. Once you have that, you can move him to the facility and list the house. Next Tuesday. 5 days. I had 5 days before I legally ceased to exist as a person. 5 days before they could drag me out of my own home and throw me into a cell at Shady Pines. 5 days before they discovered the $32 million and spent it all while I rotted away. I heard the doctor's car drive away. Monica came back inside. She didn't look at me. She walked straight to the kitchen, and I heard the pop of a cork. She was celebrating. I sat there in the silence of the living room, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. They thought the clock was ticking for me. They didn't realize it was ticking for them. I stood up from the chair. My knees didn't hurt anymore. The adrenaline was better than any painkiller. I walked past Jason, who was staring at the TV. I'm going to take a nap, I said. He didn't even turn his head. I went into my room and closed the door. I grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil. I needed to write down everything that just happened. I needed a record. And then I needed to make a phone call. Not from the house phone. They monitored that. I needed to get to the burner phone I kept in the toolbox. Dr. Evans had marked me as incompetent. He had written me off as a senile old fool. But he made one fatal mistake. He never looked at my hands. If he had, he would have seen that my knuckles were white not from confusion, but from the effort of holding back a punch. And he would have seen the dirt under my fingernails from the land he thought didn't exist. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the calendar on the wall. Tuesday was circled in red in my mind. That was the deadline. But deadlines work both ways. I picked up the pencil and pressed it so hard against the paper the lead snapped. Game on, I whispered. The pencil snapped in my hand, but the sound was swallowed by a sudden scream from the living room. It was Jason. I had never heard a sound like that come out of my son's mouth before. It wasn't a shout of anger. It was a shriek of pure terror, like a rabbit caught in a trap. I dropped the broken pencil and moved to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Please, no, Jason was begging. His voice was cracking, breaking into high-pitched sobs. I need more time, Sal. Just 2 more days. I swear I am good for it. Don't send anyone over. Please, Sal, not my hands. I need my hands. I felt a cold chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Loan sharks. He wasn't just in debt to a bank or a credit card company. He had borrowed money from people who didn't send letters. They sent breakers. And they were threatening to take his fingers. I heard the phone smash against the wall. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, frantic stomping coming straight from my room. The door flew open with such force that the doorknob punched a hole in the plaster. Jason stood there. He looked deranged. His hair was wild, his eyes were bloodshot and bulging, and sweat was pouring down his face, soaking his collar. He didn't look like a 45-year-old man. He looked like a cornered animal. "Where is it?" he screamed. He didn't wait for an answer. He tore into the room like a tornado. He grabbed the top drawer of my dresser and ripped it all the way out, dumping my socks and underwear onto the floor. He kicked the pile, searching for envelopes, searching for cash. "Jason, stop," I said, standing up. My heart was hammering, but I kept my voice low. "Son, what are you doing?" "Shut up," he yelled. He grabbed the mattress and tried to flip it over, sending my pillows flying. "I know you have cash. Old people always hide cash. Where is it, Dad? Is it in the walls? Is it under the floorboards?" He was tearing my sanctuary apart. This was the room where I had slept for 40 years. He was violating it. Violating me. "There is no money, Jason," I said, trying to step between him and the closet. "I told you, I am broke." "Liar," he turned on me. He grabbed the front of my shirt, bunching the fabric in his shaking fists. He pulled me close. I could smell the sour stench of fear on his breath. "You are lying. You always have a stash. Give it to me. I need 20 grand by tonight, or they are going to cripple me. Do you understand? They are going to cut me apart." He shook me. My head snapped back and forth. I was a big man once, strong from lifting lumber and pouring concrete. But I was 79. My bones were brittle. My balance wasn't what it used to be. "Jason, let go," I said firmly. "You are hurting me." "I don't care," he screamed. He wasn't seeing me anymore. He wasn't seeing his father. He was just seeing an obstacle. He shoved me. It wasn't a playful push. It was a violent, desperate shove with all his weight behind it. I flew backward. My feet got tangled in the bedsheets he had ripped off. I couldn't catch myself. I fell hard. My left shoulder slammed into the sharp corner of the solid oak wardrobe. The pain was blinding. It exploded in my shoulder joint like a grenade, sending white-hot shockwaves down my arm and up into my neck. I crumpled to the floor, gasping for air, unable to breathe through the agony. My vision blurred. I tasted copper in my mouth. I lay there, curled in a ball, clutching my shoulder. I waited for him to rush over. I waited for him to say he was sorry. I waited for the boy who used to cry when he stepped on a bug to come back. But he didn't come. Instead, I saw a pair of high heels step into my line of sight. Monica stood in the doorway. She looked down at me, her face twisted not in concern, but in annoyance. She stepped over my legs to get to the closet. "Oh, get up, Harry," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Stop being so dramatic. You barely touched the wood." She looked at Jason, who was standing there panting, his hands opening and closing at his sides. "Well, don't just stand there, Jason," she snapped. "Check the vents, check the toilet tank. If he won't talk, we will find it ourselves. And get the key to that safe he keeps in the garage." Jason looked at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of hesitation. He saw his father lying on the floor in pain. He saw the man who had carried him on his shoulders. But then the fear took over again. "Give me the key, Dad," he said, his voice flat and dead. Just give it to me, and this stops. I looked up at them. The pain in my shoulder was a dull roar now, but the pain in my chest was sharper. It was the feeling of a cord being cut. The invisible cord that connects a parent to a child, no matter how old they get. It snapped. Right there on the dusty floor, among the scattered socks and broken dreams. I stared at Jason. The boy I knew was gone. Dead. The thing standing in front of me was a stranger. A weak, pathetic stranger who would hurt his own father to save his own skin. I don't have the key, I whispered. I lost it. Jason let out a roar of frustration. He kicked the pile of clothes next to my head, sending dust into my face. Useless, he spat. You are absolutely useless. Come on, Monica grabbed his arm. Let us check the garage. We will pry it open with a crowbar. Leave him here to rot. They turned and walked out. They didn't look back. They didn't ask if I could stand. They didn't care if I had a broken bone or a heart attack. They just walked away, leaving me lying in the wreckage of my room. I lay there for a long time, listening to the sounds of them ransacking my garage. I breathed in slowly through my nose and out through my mouth, trying to ride the waves of pain. I moved my fingers. They worked. Nothing was paralyzed. I touched my shoulder. It was tender and already swelling, but the bone felt intact. Just a bad bruise. A very bad bruise. Slowly, painfully, I rolled onto my back. I stared up at the ceiling. The white popcorn plaster was stained with age. I looked at the smoke detector mounted right in the center of the room. It looked like a standard cheap plastic alarm, but inside that plastic shell was a high-definition camera lens. I had installed it myself 3 days ago when I first sensed the shift in the wind. It had a battery life of 6 months, and it recorded directly to a cloud server that only I could access. I watched the little red light blink. Once. Twice. It had seen everything. It had seen the fear. It had seen the violence. It had seen the assault. Jason and Monica thought they were searching for treasure. They thought they were the hunters. They didn't realize that they had just given me the weapon I needed to destroy them completely. I reached up with my good arm and wiped a single tear from my cheek. It would be the last tear I ever shed for Jason Caldwell. I dragged myself into a sitting position. My shoulder throbbed, a reminder of what happens when you trust the wrong people. I looked at the camera lens one more time and nodded. You want a war, son? I whispered to the blinking light. You just started one, and you have no idea who you are fighting. I waited until the sun was high in the sky and the house was silent. Jason was passed out on the living room sofa, a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the floor beside him. His snoring was loud and jagged, a sound that used to make me smile when he was a boy, but now just sounded like a growl. Monica was gone. I had heard her leave an hour earlier, her heels clicking on the pavement as she went to meet the realtor, or maybe to spend money she did not have yet. I slipped out the back door, clutching my left arm against my chest. My shoulder was a mess of purple and black bruises. Every step sent a jolt of pain shooting up my neck, but I welcomed it. The pain kept me sharp. It reminded me that I was not crazy, and I was not safe. I did not take my truck. Monica would notice if it was gone. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the bus stop. I sat on the cracked plastic bench trying to look invisible. When the bus came, I paid with quarters I had fished out of a jar in the garage. I rode for 40 minutes to the south side of town, to a neighborhood where the houses had bars on the windows and the lawns were mostly dirt. I got off in front of Sal's diner. It was a greasy spoon that had been there since the 50s. The neon sign was broken, buzzing loudly, and the windows were coated in a layer of grime that turned the daylight gray. It was the last place in the world Monica or her country club friends would ever set foot. I pushed open the door and the smell hit me. Stale coffee, frying bacon, and old cigarette smoke. I scanned the booths. There he was, Benjamin Roth. He was sitting in the back corner, nursing a cup of black coffee. Ben was 80 years old, same as me, but he looked like he was carved out of granite. He wore a rumpled gray suit that was probably 30 years old, and a fedora hat sat on the table next to him. Ben had been my father's lawyer, and his father had been my father's lawyer before that. He was the kind of attorney who didn't have a website and didn't advertise on billboards. He kept his files in paper boxes, and he kept his secrets in his head. I slid into the booth opposite him. He looked up, his eyes sharp and clear behind thick bifocals. He didn't smile. He just looked at my face, and then his eyes traveled down to the way I was holding my arm. "You look like hell, Harry," Ben said, his voice sounding like gravel in a mixer. "I feel like hell, Ben," I replied. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone I had taken from the toolbox. I slid it across the sticky table. "Watch this," I said. Ben put on his glasses. He pressed play on the video. I watched his face. I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the veins in his neck bulge as he watched my son shove me into the wardrobe. He watched it twice. Then he put the phone face down on the table with a slow, deliberate movement. He took a sip of coffee, but his hand was shaking slightly. Not from age, from rage. "That is assault," Harry Ben said quietly. "That is elder abuse. I can have the police pick him up in 20 minutes. I can have a restraining order on both of them by lunch." "No," I said. "Not yet." Ben looked at me like I was crazy. "Harry, did you hit your head harder than I thought?" he asked. "They are dangerous. That boy is desperate, and that woman, she is poison. You cannot go back there." "I have to go back," I said. "If we arrest them now, what happens? Jason gets a slap on the wrist because he has no priors. Monica plays the victim, saying she didn't know, and they still fight me for the guardianship. They still try to claim I am incompetent. I need to end this, Ben. Permanently." Ben sighed and leaned back in the vinyl booth. The leather squeaked. He looked at me with a mixture of frustration and respect. "You always were stubborn," he muttered. "Just like your dad." He reached into his battered leather briefcase and pulled out a thick file. He opened it and pointed to a paragraph on page 10. "You know, your dad was a smart man, Harry," Ben said. "He saw things. He knew Jason had a weak character. He knew Monica was a gold digger from the day she walked down the aisle." I looked at the document. It was the original will. "He added a clause," Ben said, tapping the paper with a callous finger. "It is called the bad actor clause. It is rare, but it is ironclad. It states that any beneficiary who is found by a court of law to have physically, mentally, or financially abused the estate holder is automatically disinherited. Not just from the specific assets, but from everything. They get nothing. Zero." I stared at the words. My father had protected me from beyond the grave. "If we use that video," Ben continued, "we can trigger this clause. But you are right. If we just show the video, they might try to argue it was an accident or self-defense. We need more. We need to prove intent. We need to prove conspiracy." That is why I am here, I said. I have a plan. I told him about the lie I had told them, about the fake poverty, about the reverse mortgage story. Ben listened, nodding slowly. A small smile started to creep onto his face. So they think you are broke, he said. And they are panicked. Exactly, I said. And panicked people get greedy. I am going to tell them I found money. Not the millions, just enough to make them drool. I am going to tell them I found a hidden account with $200,000. Ben chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. 200 grand, he mused. That is enough to pay off the loan sharks, but not enough to retire on. It is the perfect bait. I am going to tell them I will sign it over to them, I said. But I want witnesses. I want them to admit in front of people that they are taking my money in exchange for not putting me in that nursing home. Ben's eyes lit up. He understood immediately. Extortion, he whispered. You want to catch them on extortion. I want a party, I said, leaning forward. I want Monica to throw one of her fancy dinner parties. I want her to invite her lawyer and her friends. I want her to feel safe. And then when the papers are on the table, I want you to walk in. Ben took off his glasses and wiped them with a napkin. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the shark that lived inside the old man's suit. I will bring the sheriff, Ben said. He is a good friend of mine. He hates elder abuse more than he hates taxes. We sat there for another hour working out the details. Ben wrote down a script for me. Things I needed to say to get them to incriminate themselves on the audio recording. He told me how to position the camera. He told me exactly when to signal him. By the time we finished, the coffee was cold, and the diner was filling up with the lunch crowd. Ben reached across the table and grabbed my good hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Harry, he said, his voice serious. This is a dangerous game. You are going back into the lion's den. That boy of yours, he is not stable. If he finds out you are playing him. I know, I said. You have to be an actor, Ben said. You have to be the beaten dog. You have to let them think they have won completely. Can you do that? Can you let them humiliate you one last time? I thought about the way Jason looked at me when he shoved me. I thought about Monica calling me a parasite. I can do it, I said. Ben nodded. He pulled a check out of his briefcase and slid it to me. This is from your dad's estate account, he said. It is for $500. Cash it. Buy some nice wine. Buy some steaks. Tell them it is a peace offering. Tell them you want to celebrate the transfer of the funds. Make them feel like royalty. I took the check. I stood up to leave. My shoulder throbbed, a reminder of the stakes. One more thing, Ben said. I turned back. When this goes down, Harry, he said, looking me in the eye, when the truth comes out, do not look away. Watch their faces. You earned that moment. I walked out of the diner into the blinding Texas sun. The heat wrapped around me like a blanket. I walked back to the bus stop. I was going back to the house. I was going back to the insults and the threats and the fear. But it felt different now. I wasn't a victim returning to his cage. I was a soldier returning to the front lines. I touched the burner phone in my pocket. I touched the check in my wallet. They wanted a helpless old man. I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. And when the curtain fell, they would be the ones in chains. The walk back from the bus stop felt longer than the drive to the farm had the night before. The heat was radiating off the pavement in waves, making the air shimmer. But inside, I felt cold as ice. I stopped at the end of the driveway and looked at the house. It used to be a home where we grilled burgers on the 4th of July, and where I taught Jason how to change the oil in his first car. Now it was just a building holding two strangers who wanted me dead. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump forward intentionally. I relaxed my face, letting my mouth hang open slightly, and dulling the shine in my eyes. I had to put the mask back on. I had to be the defeated old man one last time. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air conditioning was humming, and the house smelled of stale coffee and expensive perfume. Jason was pacing the living room floor, wearing a path in the carpet. He looked like a wreck. His shirt was stained with sweat, and his hands were shaking uncontrollably. Monica was sitting at the dining table, aggressively typing on her laptop, probably drafting the eviction notice for my soul. When the door clicked shut, they both looked up. The hostility hit me like a physical blow. "Where the hell have you been?" Jason snapped. He marched over to me, getting right in my face. "We have been looking for you. You don't just wander off, Harry. Not when we have business to discuss." I shrank back from him, clutching my bruised shoulder as if I was terrified. "I just went for a walk," I mumbled, looking at my shoes. I needed to think. "Think about what?" Monica called out from the table. She didn't even stand up. "Think about how you are going to pay us back for years of mooching. Or think about which pillow you want to bring to Shady Pines because the transfer van comes next Tuesday." Next Tuesday. The deadline. They were tightening the screws. I shuffled into the living room and sank onto the sofa. I let out a long, shaky sigh. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old bank book I had grabbed from the toolbox earlier. It was an old blue booklet from a bank that didn't even exist anymore, having been bought out 3 times over. But inside, tucked between the pages, was the check Ben Roth had given me. Not the $500 check for the party, but a deposit slip I had forged myself years ago for a different reason entirely. "I made a decision," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell it. "I don't want to go to the home. I went there once to visit a friend. It smells like death. Please don't send me there." "Then pay up," Jason shouted. He was vibrating with anxiety. His loan sharks were probably texting him every 5 minutes. I looked at him with wet eyes. I remembered something I said, holding up the blue book. "Your mother. She had a secret account. She called it her rainy day fund. She made me promise never to touch it unless it was a matter of life and death." The room went silent. The typing stopped. Monica slowly closed her laptop. The sound of the lid clicking shut echoed in the room. "What kind of fund?" Monica asked, standing up and walking over. Her movements were slow, predatory, like a cat stalking a bird. "She saved for 30 years, I lied. Grocery money, Christmas bonuses. She was a saver, Jason. You know that." I opened the book with shaking hands. "There is just over $200,000 in here," I whispered. 200,000. I saw the number land on them. For Jason, it was salvation. It was his fingers staying attached to his hands. It was the debt wiped clean with enough left over for a new car. For Monica, it was a victory. It was proof that she had squeezed the stone hard enough to get blood. "Let me see that." Monica snatched the book from my hand. She scanned the pages, her eyes darting back and forth. "It is in a trust," I explained quickly. "I am the only trustee. I can sign it over. I can dissolve the trust and give it all to you as a gift." Jason let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He fell to his knees in front of me, grabbing my knees. "Dad," he choked out. "Oh my God, Dad. 200 grand. That fixes it. That fixes everything. You have to sign it. You have to give it to us. Today, right now." I pulled back slightly. This was the moment. The negotiation. "I will sign it," I said, looking at him. "But I have conditions." Monica's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed. "Conditions?" she repeated. "You are not really in a position to bargain, Harry." "I think I am," I said, finding a little bit of steel in my voice. "Because without my signature, that money sits there for another 10 years. And Jason doesn't have 10 years. He doesn't have 10 hours. Jason looked at Monica, panic flaring in his eyes again. "Monica, just do it," he begged. "Whatever he wants." I took a deep breath. "I want the guardianship dropped," I said. "No doctors, no courts. You tear up that application. I stay in this house, in my room. Nobody touches my things. Nobody tells me when to sleep or what to eat. I live here in peace until I die. That is the deal. 200,000 for my freedom." Monica pursed her lips. She was calculating. She was weighing the joy of controlling me against the immediate gratification of the cash. Greed won. It always does with people like her. "Fine," she said. "We drop the petition. You stay here. But you pay for your own food, and you stay out of our way." "And I want it legal," I added. "I want to sign the papers in front of witnesses. I don't want you coming back later saying I stole it or I tricked you. I want a clean transfer. Witnesses." Monica scoffed. "What do you want, a parade?" "No," I said. "A dinner. Sunday night. Invite your lawyer. Invite the neighbors. We will have a nice meal. I will sign the check over to Jason in front of everyone. We will toast to the future. And then we are done." Monica smiled. It was a cold, triumphant smile. She loved the idea. She loved an audience. She loved the idea of parading her victory in front of her friends, showing them how she had managed to secure a fortune from her stubborn father-in-law. "A dinner," she mused. "Yes, that actually works. I can invite the Millers and the Davises. We can frame it as a retirement gift you are giving to your son. It makes us look good. It makes us look like a happy family." "Exactly," I said. "A happy family." She handed the bank book back to me. "Sunday night," she said. "But if you try anything, Harry, if you try to back out, I will put you in a place so dark they won't find you for a month." "I am not backing out," I said, clutching the book to my chest. "I just want to help my son." Jason stood up and wiped his face. He looked like a man who had just survived a firing squad. "Thanks, Dad," he muttered. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch me. He just looked at the bank book with hungry eyes. "Now, if you will excuse me," I said, standing up. "I am tired. I want to rest." I walked past them. I felt their eyes on my back. They were already spending the money. They were already planning the party. I went into my room and closed the door. I didn't lock it this time. I didn't need to. They wouldn't hurt me now. I was the golden goose. Until Sunday night, I was the most valuable thing in the house. I sat on the bed and let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding for days. The hook was set. They had bitten deep. $200,000. It was a lot of money to them. But compared to $32 million, it was pocket change. It was the cost of doing business. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes. I pictured Sunday night. I pictured the food. I pictured the wine. I pictured Ben Roth walking through the door with the sheriff. Monica said knowing when to give up was a virtue. She looked at me before I left the room and said, "See, was that so hard being reasonable?" I laughed softly in the empty room. "No, Monica," I whispered. "It wasn't hard at all, because the hardest part is watching the people you love turn into monsters. Dealing with the monsters themselves is easy. You just have to be willing to turn on the light." I reached under the bed and pulled out the red toolbox. I patted the cold metal lid. Sunday night would be the end of the lies. Sunday night, I would get my life back. And Sunday night, my son and his wife would learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. Never underestimate the man who built the foundation you are standing on, because he knows exactly where to pull the pin to bring the whole house down. Sunday night arrived with the humidity of a wet wool blanket wrapping itself around the house. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom looking at a ghost. Monica had insisted I wear my old charcoal suit, the one I hadn't touched since my wife's funeral 10 years ago. It hung loosely on my frame, now smelling faintly of mothballs and cedar. I looked frail. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like the man they wanted me to be. I walked out into the hallway, and the smell of money hit me before I even reached the living room. Monica had gone all out. There were fresh flowers on every surface, lilies and orchids that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. A catering crew was moving silently through the kitchen, arranging silver platters of food. I saw lobster tails glistening with butter. I saw thick cuts of prime rib. I saw bottles of wine with labels I couldn't pronounce. They were spending the money I hadn't even signed over yet. Harry. Monica's voice trilled from the entryway. She swept toward me in a black cocktail dress that hugged her like a second skin. Her hair was piled high on her head, and diamonds sparkled at her throat. She looked beautiful and terrifying. "You look presentable," she said, picking a piece of lint off my lapel. "Now remember the script. You are happy to do this. You are retiring. You want to simplify your life. If you say anything about the loan sharks or the threats, I will make sure the nurses at Shady Pines forget to feed you. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, looking down at my scuffed shoes. "Good." She patted my cheek, a little too hard. "Now go sit in the corner chair. The guests will be here any minute. And try not to drool." I walked over to the small armchair they had positioned in the corner of the room, away from the main action. I was a prop. I was the old grandfather clock in the hallway, there for decoration and atmosphere, but mostly ignored. The doorbell rang, and the performance began. The guests were exactly who I expected. The Millers and the Davises, people from Monica's circle. Real estate agents and developers who measured a man's worth by the car he drove and the zip code he lived in. They breezed in with their fake tans and their loud laughs, kissing the air next to Monica's cheeks and shaking Jason's hand with vigorous slaps on the back. Jason was already drunk. I could tell by the way his eyes were slightly unfocused, and his smile was a little too loose. He was holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, probably my father's 20-year-old scotch that I had been saving for a special occasion. I guess this was special to him. He was celebrating his survival. "Oh, Harry, there you are," Mrs. Davis cooed, walking over to me with a glass of white wine in her hand. "Monica tells us you are doing such a generous thing, passing the torch. That is so noble." I forced a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "It is time," I said, my voice raspy. The kids need it more than I do. Isn't that the truth? Mr. Miller laughed, joining us. He was a man who wore gold rings on 3 fingers. You know, Harry, most men your age hold on to the purse strings until the bitter end. It takes a big man to know when to step aside. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Step aside. As if I was a piece of broken machinery on a construction site. Dinner is served, Monica announced, clapping her hands. They moved to the dining room. The table was set for 6. Monica, Jason, the Millers, and the Davises. There was no place setting for me at the main table. Harry, we set you up a nice tray right here, Monica said, pointing to a small folding table near the kitchen door. We figured you would be more comfortable where it is quieter. Plus, you know how messy lobster can get. I looked at the folding table. It was the kind you use for card games. On it was a plate with a scoop of mashed potatoes and a dry piece of chicken breast. No lobster, no prime rib. I sat down. The humiliation burned in my chest, hotter than the Texas sun, but I swallowed it. I picked up my fork and began to eat. I watched them feast. I watched them crack the shells of the lobsters, laughing as butter dripped down their chins. I watched Jason pour more wine, his voice getting louder and more boastful with every glass. I am telling you, Bob, Jason shouted across the table, gesturing with a fork. The market is about to explode. This capital injection is just what I needed. I am looking at that new BMW M5, the one with the carbon fiber package. A BMW, Monica laughed, touching his arm. Honey, maybe we should invest some of it first. Invest, schminvest, Jason slurred. We deserve a reward. We have been taking care of responsibilities for so long. He waved his hand in my direction without looking at me. You know my dad, he continued, leaning in as if sharing a secret. He never knew how to live. He worked his fingers to the bone for pennies. He framed houses he could never afford to buy. He saved every receipt. It is sad, really, living like a peasant when you don't have to. The guests chuckled nervously, glancing at me. I kept my head down, pushing the dry chicken around my plate. But that is the old generation, Mr. Miller said. They didn't understand leverage. Exactly. Jason banged his fist on the table. Leverage. That is the word. Dad was afraid of debt. He was afraid of risk. And look where it got him. Sitting at a card table eating chicken while the real players eat lobster. The room went quiet for a second. Even Monica looked uncomfortable. That was too far. That was cruel even for him. Jason, Monica hissed. What? Jason threw his hands up. It is the truth. I am doing him a favor. I am taking the burden off him. He doesn't know what to do with money. He would probably just bury it in the backyard in a coffee can. I am going to make it grow. I am going to build an empire. He stood up, swaying slightly. He raised his glass. To the future, he bellowed, and to the transfer of power. May the best man win. Hear, hear, the guests chorused, raising their glasses. I put my fork down. I was done. I looked up at the ceiling, at the little smoke detector blinking its red eye. I hoped it was getting all of this. I hoped it was recording every insult, every slur, every drop of ingratitude. Monica stood up. She smoothed her dress. Well, speaking of the transfer, she said, her voice sweet as syrup. Why don't we make it official? Harry, do you have the checkbook? I slowly reached into my inside pocket. I pulled out the blue book. I stood up. My knees ached, but I forced myself to walk steady. I walked over to the main table. Jason looked at me with a smirk. He didn't see his father. he saw a walking ATM. "Right here, Dad," he said, tapping the tablecloth. "Sign right here." I opened the book. I took the pen Monica offered me. It was a heavy, expensive pen. I looked at the faces around the table. The Millers and the Davises looked expectantly, waiting for the show. Monica looked triumphant. Jason looked greedy. "I am doing this because I love you, son," I said softly. Yeah, love you too, Dad," Jason said dismissively. "Just sign it so we can cut the cake." I bent down. I put the pen to the paper. I wrote my name. Harrison Caldwell. There, Monica snatched the check the second I lifted the pen. She blew on the ink. "Done," she announced. The room erupted in applause. Jason pumped his fist in the air. "Finally," he shouted. "Finally, I can breathe." He grabbed the bottle of champagne from the ice bucket. "More drinks," he yelled. "We need to celebrate. This calls for the good stuff. Monica, get the vintage from the cellar." I stood there, empty-handed. I felt light. I felt clean. The transaction was done. They had taken the bait, the hook, the line, and the sinker. I backed away toward the kitchen door. I wanted to be out of the splash zone when the bomb went off. Just then, a sharp sound cut through the laughter. Ding dong! The doorbell. Everyone froze. "Who is that?" Monica asked, looking at her watch. "It is 9 o'clock. "Probably the delivery guy," Jason laughed. "I ordered a case of cigars. Cuban. Illegal as hell, but hey, I am a rich man now." He started to move toward the door, but he stumbled. "I will get it," Monica said, rolling her eyes. "Sit down before you break something, Jason." She walked to the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I watched her from the shadows of the kitchen. I knew exactly who was behind that door. I had texted Ben Roth the moment I sat down at the card table. Monica opened the door with a flourish. "Sorry, we are in the middle of a—" Her voice died in her throat. I stepped forward just enough to see. Standing on the porch was not a delivery boy. It was Benjamin Roth in his rumpled gray suit holding his battered briefcase. And standing behind him, filling the doorway with his massive frame, was Sheriff Patterson. The sheriff wasn't smiling. His hat was pulled low and his hand was resting on his belt near his badge. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Ben Roth said, his voice carrying clearly into the silent dining room. "We apologize for the interruption, but I believe you have something that belongs to my client." Monica took a step back, her face draining of color. "Your client," she stammered. "Who is your client?" Ben Roth looked past her, straight at me. "Mr. Harrison Caldwell," he said. "And we are not here for the check. We are here for the handcuffs." "You have no right to be here," Monica screeched, her voice climbing an octave as she tried to physically block the doorway with her slender frame. "This is a private party. Get off my property before I call the police." Sheriff Patterson didn't blink. He just looked down at her from under the brim of his hat, with eyes that had seen everything from bar fights to homicides. And he wasn't impressed by a woman in a cocktail dress trying to give him orders. "We are the police, ma'am," the sheriff said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. "And as for this being your property, that is a matter of debate. Now step aside." He didn't wait for her to move. He simply walked forward, and the sheer size of him forced Monica to retreat backward into the foyer, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. Ben Roth followed him, his battered leather briefcase swinging at his side like a wrecking ball. The dining room had gone deadly silent. The Millers and the Davises were frozen, with their forks halfway to their mouths, their eyes darting between the police officers and their hosts. Jason had slumped back in his chair, the color draining from his face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. He knew what police meant. He thought it was about the loan sharks. He thought they had come to collect a debt in blood. "What is the meaning of this?" Jason stammered, trying to stand up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. "I haven't done anything. If this is about the car, I can explain." "Sit down, son," Ben Roth barked. The authority in his voice was absolute. It wasn't the voice of a dusty old lawyer anymore. It was the voice of judgment. Ben walked to the head of the table. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the guests. He placed his briefcase on the table, right next to the lobster shells and the crystal glasses. He popped the latches. Click, click. The sound was louder than a gunshot in the quiet room. Monica rallied, trying to regain control of her stage. "I am calling my lawyer," she announced, reaching for her phone. "You can't just barge in here and disrupt my dinner. We are celebrating a family transaction." "Oh, we know all about the transaction," Ben said, without looking up as he pulled a thick blue document from his case. "We're here to clarify the terms." He held up the document. It looked ancient. The paper was yellowed at the edges. "This," he said, holding it up for the room to see, "is the last will and testament of Wallace Caldwell, Harry's father. Your grandfather, Jason." Jason let out a nervous laugh. "Grandpa's will?" he scoffed. "What is this, a joke? The old man didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We already went through his junk. There is nothing there." Ben lowered the document and looked Jason right in the eye. "That is where you were wrong. Wallace Caldwell was a man who believed in silence. He believed that wealth should be whispered, not shouted. And he owned 3 parcels of land in Travis County, 500 acres, known as the Coyote Creek Tract. I saw Mr. Davis perk up. He was a developer. He knew land. Coyote Creek Davis interrupted. "Wait a minute. That is right in the middle of the new tech corridor. That land is adjacent to the new highway." Ben nodded slowly. "Correct. And for the last 6 months, while you were busy trying to put your father in a home to steal his house, Wallace's estate was in negotiations with Horizon Data Systems." He turned the page of the will. The rustle of the paper was the only sound in the world. "As of yesterday morning, the deal was finalized," Ben read. "The purchase price for the 3 parcels has been set, and the funds are currently in escrow, waiting for the signature of the sole beneficiary, Harrison Caldwell." Ben paused. He let the silence stretch until it was almost painful. "The purchase price is $32 million. The air left the room. It was as if someone had opened an airlock and sucked all the oxygen out into space. 32 million. I watched Monica. Her mouth fell open. Her eyes went wide, so wide I thought they might pop out of her head. The glass of wine in her hand tilted, and red liquid spilled onto her expensive dress, but she didn't even notice. Jason looked like he had been hit with a taser. His mouth worked silently like a fish on a dock. 32 million, he whispered. "Yes," Ben said, closing the folder. $32 million. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. And then the transformation happened. It was sickening to watch. The fear and confusion on Jason's face vanished, replaced instantly by a greed so pure and so intense it was almost blinding. He scrambled up from his chair, knocking it over. "Oh my God!" he shouted. "Oh my God! We are rich! Monica, did you hear that? 32 million! We are bigger than the Davises! We are bigger than everyone!" He turned to me. His eyes were wild. He rushed around the table, his arms spread wide, ready to embrace me. ready to hug the father he had called a parasite 10 minutes ago. "Dad!" Jason yelled. "Why didn't you say something? You sly old fox! You were testing us, weren't you? You wanted to surprise us. Oh, Dad, I love you. Think of what we can do. The cars, the boats. We can buy the whole block." Monica was right behind him, her face rearranging itself into a mask of pure adoration. "Harry," she cried, reaching out for me. "Oh, Harry, I knew it. I always knew you were special. I told Jason, didn't I tell you, Jason, that your father was a genius? We have to celebrate."
"Open the good champagne. No, open all of it."
They were closing in on me. Their hands were reaching for me. They wanted to touch the money. They wanted to claim me. I stood up. I didn't need the cane. I didn't need the act. I stood up to my full height. I looked at Jason. I looked at Monica. "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold. It was the cold of a grave. They froze. "Dad," Jason said, his smile faltering slightly. "What is wrong? Let us celebrate. We are a team, remember? Family." I looked him up and down. I looked at the son I had raised. "No," I said, "we are not a team, and we are not rich." I took a step forward, forcing Jason to step back. "I am rich," I said, pointing a finger at my own chest. "Me, Harrison Caldwell." But, Jason stammered. "I am your son. It is the same thing. What is yours is ours." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it really?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the check I had just signed. The check for $200,000. The price of my freedom. 10 minutes ago, I said, holding the check up. "You forced me to sign this. You told me I was a parasite. You told me I was worthless. You told your friends here that I was a peasant who didn't know how to live." I ripped the check in half, then in half again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. "You wanted $200,000, Jason. You were willing to sell your father for it. Well, now you have nothing." Monica stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. The mask was slipping. "Harry, don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "You can't just cut us out. We have rights. We are your caretakers. If you are mentally incompetent, which we all know you are, then we control that money." Ben Roth laughed. He walked over to the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. He pulled an HDMI cable from his bag and plugged it into his laptop. "Competence is a funny thing, Mrs. Caldwell," Ben said. "And so is character. You see, Wallace's will has a very specific clause. It is called the bad actor clause. It states that any beneficiary who attempts to harm, defraud, or abuse the heir forfeits all claims to the estate." He hit a key on his laptop. The TV screen flickered to life. It was a black and white image, but it was crystal clear. It was the view from a smoke detector looking down into a bedroom. My bedroom. The room gasped. On the screen, Jason was screaming. His face was twisted in rage. The audio was perfect. "I need 20 grand by tonight or they are going to cripple me," the Jason on the screen screamed. Then the shove. The guests watched in horror as Jason slammed his 79-year-old father into the wardrobe. They heard the sickening thud of my shoulder hitting the wood. They saw me crumble to the floor. Monica gasped, putting her hand over her mouth. Ben hit another key. The video changed. It was audio now. A recording from the kitchen. "He is a burden, Jason. Do you want to lose your fingers? It is him or us. Shady Pines has a bed open. He can rot there. The silence in the room was absolute. Mr. Miller stood up slowly. He looked at Jason with pure disgust. "You shoved him," Miller said quietly. "You shoved your own father." Jason was shaking his head, backing away toward the wall. No, that is taken out of context," he stammered. "I was stressed. It was an accident. Dad, tell them it was an accident." I looked at him. I looked at the tears streaming down his face. They were tears of fear, not remorse. "It wasn't an accident," I said. "It was a choice. You chose money over me." Sheriff Patterson stepped forward. The floorboards creaked under his weight. He reached for his belt. The sound of handcuffs unclipping was sharp and final. "Jason Caldwell," the sheriff said, his voice filling the room. "You are under arrest for the aggravated assault of an elderly person. That is a second-degree felony in the state of Texas." He grabbed Jason's arm and spun him around. Click, click. "No!" Jason screamed as the metal cuffed his wrists. Dad, stop them!"
I am your son. You can't do this. I am sorry. I will be better.
I didn't say a word. I just watched. The sheriff turned to Monica. She was trying to edge toward the back door. "Mrs. Caldwell, don't move," the sheriff barked. "We have a warrant for your arrest as well. Conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. We have your text messages with Dr. Evans. We know you paid him to falsify medical records." Monica stopped. She looked at the guests who were now backing away from her as if she had the plague. She looked at the lobster on the table. She looked at the diamonds on her wrist. "This is a mistake," she hissed. "My lawyer will destroy you." "Your lawyer," Ben Roth said dryly, "is currently giving a statement to the district attorney to save his own license. You are on your own, Monica." The sheriff cuffed her. She didn't scream like Jason. She just glared at me with pure hate. "You planned this," she spat at me. "You old snake. You planned this whole thing." I walked over to her. I looked her right in the eye. "I built this house, Monica," I said softly. "I built the foundation. I framed the walls. Did you really think you could tear it down without me noticing?" "Take them away," Sheriff Ben said. The guests parted like the Red Sea as the sheriff marched Jason and Monica out the front door. Jason was sobbing, loud, ugly sobs that echoed in the foyer. Monica walked with her head high, but her hands were shaking behind her back. I watched the flashing blue lights of the cruiser reflect off the crystal chandelier. The room was quiet again. The Millers and the Davises stood there, awkward and ashamed. "Mr. Caldwell," Mr. Miller started. We had no idea." "Get out," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. They grabbed their purses and their jackets and they ran. They scrambled out the door, leaving the door wide open to the hot Texas night. I was alone. I looked at the table full of food. I looked at the empty chairs. Ben Roth walked over and placed a hand on my good shoulder. "It is done, Harry," he said. "It is over." I nodded. I walked over to the table and picked up my father's bottle of scotch. I poured 2 glasses, one for me and one for Ben. I raised my glass. "To Wallace," I said. Ben clinked his glass against mine. "To Wallace," he said, "and to freedom." I took a sip. It tasted like smoke and oak. It tasted like $32 million. But mostly, it tasted like the truth. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers bounced off the walls of the dining room, creating a strobe effect that made the half-eaten lobster on the table look grotesque. I stood by the window and watched them go. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to watch. Not because I was scared or because I was confused, but because I was watching the funeral of my own fatherhood. Jason was screaming as they dragged him down the walkway. He was not screaming obscenities anymore. He was screaming for me.
"Daddy, please," he wailed. "I am sorry. Don't let them take me. I am your boy. Daddy, help me."
His voice cracked on the word daddy. It was the same pitch, the same desperate tone he used when he was 6 years old and scraped his knee falling off his bike. My instinct, the instinct that had driven me for 45 years, was to run out there, to tell the sheriff it was a mistake, to open my wallet and pay whatever fine was needed to make the bad men go away. That is what a father does. A father protects. A father forgives. But I did not move. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floorboards I had laid with my own hands. I gripped the windowsill until my knuckles turned white. I could see the neighbors gathering on their lawns. They were wearing bathrobes and pajamas, peering into the darkness. They saw Jason crying. They saw Monica being shoved into the back of a separate car, her face a mask of stone. They saw the ruin of the Caldwell family played out on the front lawn for everyone to see. Ben Roth stood beside me. He did not say a word. He knew that any comfort he tried to offer right now would just feel like sandpaper on a raw wound. He just stood witness. As the sheriff's car began to pull away, Jason pressed his face against the glass. Our eyes met for 1 second. In that second, I did not see the greedy monster who had shoved me. I saw my son, and he saw me. He saw the man he had underestimated. He saw the man he had tried to bury. And then the car turned the corner, and he was gone. I let out a breath that shuddered through my entire body. It felt like I had been holding it for a week. The silence that rushed back into the house was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the last shot has been fired. I walked over to the dining table. I looked at the check I had torn up. The pieces were scattered on the rug like confetti from the world's saddest party. I bent down and picked up a piece. It had my signature on it. "I'm sorry, son," I whispered to the empty room. "I am sorry I didn't teach you that character matters more than cash. I am sorry I shielded you from the hard work that makes a man appreciate what he has." I turned to Ben. He was packing up his laptop. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Ben said, closing his briefcase with a soft click. "Now justice takes its course. The video is damning, Harry. They will be arraigned in the morning. With the assault charge and the attempted fraud, they are looking at 5 to 10 years. Monica might get more because of the medical forgery." 5 years, I repeated. I walked to the front door and closed it. I locked it. Ben put a hand on my shoulder. "You saved your life tonight, Harry," he said. "Never forget that. If you hadn't done this, if you had signed those papers, you wouldn't be standing here. You would be in a room at Shady Pines wondering why nobody came to visit." "I know," I said. "I know." Ben left a few minutes later, leaving me alone in the house. I didn't sleep that night. I walked from room to room. I went into Jason's old bedroom, which we had turned into a guest room. I opened the closet and found his old baseball glove on the top shelf. I put my hand in it. It was small, stiff leather. I sat on the bed and I cried. I cried for the loss of the past. I cried for the wife who wasn't here to see this. I wondered if she would hate me for what I did. I wondered if she would forgive me for sending our only child to prison. but then I touched my shoulder. It was throbbing. A deep purple bruise was spreading across my skin. The physical evidence of his choice. He had chosen to hurt me. He had chosen money over my safety. And that was a line that once crossed could never be uncrossed. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and depositions. I refused to bail them out. That was the hardest part. The phone calls from the jail. I told the lawyer to block the number. I couldn't listen to the begging. I had to be strong. I had to be the rock. 6 months later. The sound of the ocean is different than the sound of the wind in the Texas plains. It is rhythmic, constant. It breathes. I sat on the deck of the beach house holding a cup of coffee. The sun was coming up over the water, painting the waves in shades of gold and pink. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I was not in Austin anymore. I sold the house. I couldn't live there. Too many ghosts. Too many shadows in the corners. I sold it to a nice young couple with a baby on the way. I left them the toolbox. I told the husband that a house is only as strong as the hands that build it. I hope he understood what I meant. The 3 farms were sold to the data company. The deal closed 2 months ago. The final number wasn't 32 million. It was 35. Bidding wars are a hell of a thing. I looked at the check when it came. It was just a piece of paper. It didn't make me feel taller. It didn't make my hair grow back. It was just numbers. But numbers can do good work if you tell them where to go. A car pulled up into the gravel driveway. It was a convertible. Ben Roth stepped out wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. He looked ridiculous, and he looked happy. "Morning, Harry," he shouted, waving a file folder. "Morning, Ben," I called back. "Coffee is hot." Ben walked up the steps and sat in the wicker chair next to me. He poured himself a cup and sighed contentedly. "I have the paperwork for the foundation," he said, tapping the folder. "The Wallace Caldwell Foundation for Elder Justice. It is official. We are a registered non-profit." I smiled. This was the real inheritance. "We have our first case," Ben said, opening the file. "A woman in Dallas. Her daughter forged her signature on a reverse mortgage. They are trying to evict her next week." I took the file. I looked at the woman's picture. She looked scared. She looked like I did 6 months ago. "Get the best lawyers we have," I said. "Stop the eviction. Pay off the mortgage if you have to, but make sure that daughter never touches another dime of her mother's money." "Done," Ben said, making a note. We sat there for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. "Have you heard from him?" Ben asked quietly. He didn't have to say the name. I took a sip of coffee. "I got a letter," I said, "from the prison. He's working in the laundry. He says he is sorry. He says he is sober." Ben nodded. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know," I said. "And to be honest, Ben, I don't think it matters right now. Maybe in 5 years, when he gets out, we can sit down and talk. Maybe. But trust is like a mirror. Once you break it, you can glue it back together, but you will always see the cracks in your reflection." I stood up and walked to the railing. I looked out at the vast, endless ocean. I felt small, but I felt solid. For a long time, I thought my job as a father was to give my son everything he wanted. I thought love meant saying yes. I thought love meant sacrifice. But I learned the hard way that sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means stopping someone from destroying themselves and taking you down with them. I thought about Monica. She took a plea deal. 3 years. She blamed Jason. She blamed me. She never learned. Some people never do. They are hollow inside, and they try to fill that empty space with things. Cars, houses, diamonds. But it is never enough. It is like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. I am 80 years old now. I have $35 million in the bank. I live in a house by the sea. But that is not what makes me rich. I turned back to Ben. You know what the best part is? I asked. Ben looked up. The money? No, I said, tapping my chest. The silence. I sleep at night, Ben. I close my eyes, and I don't worry about who is plotting against me in the next room. I don't worry about being a burden. I don't worry about being worth more dead than alive. I walked over and picked up the file of the woman in Dallas. I have a purpose, I said. My father Wallace left me this money not so I could rot on a beach, but so I could fight. He hated bullies, and I hate them too. I looked at the camera if there was one filming the movie of my life. Blood is a powerful thing. It connects us. It binds us. But it is not a suicide pact. Family is supposed to be your safe harbor, not the storm that sinks you. I learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. I had to lose a son to find myself. I had to be broken to realize I was made of steel. But I am still here. I am still standing. And for anyone out there listening to this, anyone who feels small, anyone who feels used, anyone who is afraid to speak up because they think they are too old or too weak, listen to me. You are not done. You are not a burden. You are the foundation. And if someone tries to tear you down, you show them exactly who you are. You show them that the person who built the house knows exactly how to bring the roof down on their heads. I finished my coffee. I looked at Ben. Ready to get to work, counselor? I asked. Ben grinned, putting on his sunglasses. Ready when you are, Harry. We opened the files. We started to plan. The sun was shining. The tide was coming in. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. Now, looking back at the waves crashing against the shore, I realized that the $35 million isn't the hero of this story. The money is just a tool. The real victory was the moment I decided to stop being a victim. For too long, I let my fear of being alone dictate my life. I let my son and his wife treat me like furniture because I was afraid that if I spoke up, I would lose the only family I had left. But I learned a hard lesson that I want to share with you. A family that requires you to silence your dignity to belong is not a family. It is a hostage situation. I hope my story serves as a wake-up call. To the parents out there, do not give away your power just to keep the peace. You spent your lives building, working, and sacrificing. You deserve respect, and if you don't get it, you have every right to demand it, or to walk away and build a new life, just like I did. I am 80 years old, and for the first time in decades, I am truly living. I have Ben. I have my work with the foundation, and most importantly, I have my self-respect. That is worth more than all the land in Texas. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a difficult journey, but sharing it with you makes it feel even more meaningful. I hope it gives you the courage to face your own battles, whatever they may be. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love reading where you all are from and what time it is in your part of the world. It makes the world feel a little smaller and a little warmer. Tell me, do you think I was too hard on Jason and Monica? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? I really want to know your opinion. If you liked the story and want to support the channel, you can send us a super thanks. It helps us keep bringing you more real-life stories like this one. Thank you so much for your sweet support. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next life story. See you in the next video. With love and respect.